Hi guys, welcome to episode 2 of my tutorials, which is titled Data Structures and Algorithms in Java. Okay, so the last time we looked at the data types and then how to print and stuff. So today I'm going to take you through loops and then we'll look at arrays. Alright, so let me just clear this. Now, the Java syntax for a for loop goes by this. So we have for, then followed by brackets. Then we can now have int, let's say I is equal to, let's say, 0, then we have semicolon, I less than 5, then we have another semicolon, then we have I plus plus. Then as usual we follow it by curly braces, open and close. Okay, so this is what happens, right? Okay, so I think my curly braces I have opened 1 2 3, but I've closed only 2, so let's close another one. Great. Anyway, okay, so now we have for int I is equal to 0, that is the start. So it starts with I equal to 0, and you see I is being defined here, I less than 5. So this loop, whatever is in this loop here, will keep running until I is no more less than 5. Then I plus plus means you keep incrementing I by 1. Alright, so let's say since you already know the syntax for print, let's just do system dot out dot println. Then we'll keep printing I. Then always remember a semicolon. Right, so once you run this, you realize that it prints 0 1 2 3 4. Yeah, that's because we have this. Now if I do I is less than or equal to, your guess as good as mine as regards to what it will print. So it will print up to 5 instead of 0 to 4. Now let's try this and see if this would work. If I plus is equal to 2, let's go. So you see it prints in steps of 2, 0, 2, 4, and that is all. So this loop will run just 3 times because of our step. So having I plus plus means keep incrementing I by 1. Having I plus is equal to 2 is more like saying I is equal to I plus 2. So after every time it runs the instructions under the loop, it increments I by 2. Okay, now let's also look at while loop. So I'm going to comment this, and to comment in Java use the slash star and then come and close it by star slash. Yeah, okay, and mind you, you could also comment with double slash, something like this. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at a while loop. So while I is greater than 5, it should print I. So system dot out dot println I. Okay, great. But let's make this interesting. Let's add a string here. So let's say we are printing the value of I is, then we now have I. I realize I is red. Yeah, that is because we've not defined I. So here let's define I as an integer. Int I is equal to, we say while I is greater than 5, right? So let's make I 10. Int I is, so now this is what happens. If you run this, it would never stop working. It will never stop printing because I is 10 and 10 is always greater than 5. So this is an infinite while loop. You have to do something about it. Yeah, and then you can see here we have a little red underline. Yeah, that is because I just did this and then attached I, which is unrecognizable. You need to use concatenation, so plus. So it's more like we have a string here, then we have plus I. Now Java will automatically convert this I to a string so that it concatenates them, even though I is an integer. Yeah, at some point you would like to use this method when you want to convert an integer into a string. Okay, so this is what we are going to do. After it prints, it needs to decrease I so that it will actually approach the 5, so that at some point this value will be false. At the moment this is always true, so when assuming I put while true here, then this would keep running forever, it will never stop. Good. So let's bring it back to our initial. While I is greater than 5, it should keep working. Once I is less than 5, that means this statement is not true, or once I is equal to 5, it is not true anymore, so it would stop running. So let's decrease I after every time whatever is in the loop runs. So we say I minus minus. Actually, I was going to do I minus is equal to 1. This is also cool. So I minus minus will decrement I by 1. You could also have I minus is equal to 1. Yeah. Okay, so let's run this and see. So you realize that we have the value of I is, then we have 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, then it stops running. Yeah, that is because when I became 5, this statement ceased becoming true. Okay, so now we know of a for loop, we know of a while loop. Let's look at another special form of a while loop, which is a do while loop. Okay, so now we have int I, which we would be using a new form of commenting. You could just use control plus slash to comment all of them, but just like to comment them line by line. Okay, so we already have int I defined at the top there. Anyway, let me just delete this so we don't get confused, and then let me also delete this for group. Yeah, so all we have is int I, and in IntelliJ, once you don't use a variable, it is sort of not looking nice, so they try to notify you that it's never used, so can kind of delete it, but we will use it soon, so we wouldn't delete it yet. All right, so we have a do while loop. So we say do, then followed by curly braces. So what do we want to do? Yeah, so we say, let's say system dot out dot print ln, then it should print I. It should do this. Do you get it? Do this while, then followed by curly braces, right? Then we can say while I is greater than 5. So that means once I is less than 5, it will stop. This is also sort of an infinite while loop because it will always do the do. Realize that I is always greater than 5. So we need to find a way of decrementing it as usual. So we have I minus minus. So anytime the do is run, then it will always decrement I by 1 in that order, and it will print I decrement by 1 and then check, then it will do that. So the do while loop will do before it will check, but the while loop will check before it will do. I don't know if that makes sense, but it should. Yeah, so let's run this and see. Okay, so we have 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Yeah, but you didn't get the difference between what I said earlier. The do while loop will do before it checks, the while loop will check before it does. So let me make this while I is greater than 11. Now we both know that 10 is not greater than 11, right? Good. So let's see what will happen, and let me remove this. So under normal circumstances, using a while loop, this shouldn't run. I is 10. So while I is greater than 11, I is not greater than 11. So this wouldn't even execute because this is false. But let's see what the do while loop would do. You see, the do while loop printed 10, then it stopped. So after printing, so it did what was in the do block, which was print I. Then it now checked. So you use this when you want your code to do something before it checks a condition. That's when you use the do while loop. And you use the while loop when you want it to check the condition before it does the do. Yeah, that is great, right? Okay, so let's look at arrays and see what we can do with arrays. So in Java, in order to define an array, you just, let's say an array of integers, you start with the data type followed by square braces, then the name. So let's say R1 or ARR. Okay, good. So in this one, I'm just declaring that I'm creating an array, but I'm not populating it. But what if I want to populate it? I can just do this is equal to, then open curly brace and start putting my values there, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is all. So this is one way of defining an array. You could also have an empty array. Let's say int then we have this arr is equal to, then we do new int, then followed by the number of items I want to put in the array, let's say 4. So let's say this is R1. Okay, so the difference between this and this is, so while this one you are hard coding the data in the array, so you've populated the array already, but this one it just creates an empty array of size 4, which you can add your own stuff in it. Okay, so let's use our for loop to help us with this. So we have for. Now there's also another form of for loop which is called the for each loop, so I would use that just yet. So for int I is equal to, let's say 3, I less than, so it starts from 3, right? And we have 1. Let's just start with our 0 maybe to make things easier. So for int I is equal to 0, then we are going to count, let's say 4 times, so I less than 4, then we have I plus plus. Okay, that's great. So now that we have this, let's see what we want to do. So we want to populate this array which is not populated. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, let's try to print the content of each array and see. System.out.println followed by, so this array is called arr1, then index, let's say I. So arrays start with index 0. So this is index 0, this is index 1, index 2, index 3. So this one also has a size of 4, so it has 4 indices, 0 to 3. Okay, so we are printing the content of R1. So let's run this and see. So you see it is 0, 0. Remember in our previous episode I said the default value for integers is 0. So because we hadn't populated this array, then all its contents are 0, 0. But if I try to print the content of ARR, then realize that we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, as expected. So now we are going to populate the second array. So we just say ARR1 index I. So you see, initially the I will be 0, then 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it will start index this, then it's equal to. So let's say I minus 4. It's just something we want to do. So I minus 4. So anytime at index 0, it will take 0 minus 4, which is negative 4. At index 1, it will take that. So let's just run it and then I hope you get what I said. So the result will show what we have. So it has populated the array. But do we know what is in the array? No. So let's just create another for loop, which this time is going to be a for each loop. So for int I, then followed by a column. So I have already defined int I, right? So let's say int k followed by a column in arr1. Then let's have our system.out.println k. So this is how the for each loop works. It will take each of these. So for int k in array1, so for each k in array1, so it will start, it will loop through the entire array, and you use this mostly when you don't know the size of the array. For instance, if I don't know this array has a size of 4, then if I use this, let's say if I had put 5 here, then I would get array index out of bounds error. But when I use it for each loop, it will just loop through the entire array, and that is all. So let's run this and see. So when we ran, we realized that this for loop had already done the population with negative numbers from -4 down to 1. And this one then loops through and prints each of them. But you see here, we just use print k because k will always be assigned to the current term in the array we are referencing. So that is it for this episode. Thank you for watching and look out for my next video which will be uploaded soon. Have a nice day.